They're getting spanked pretty good.
I know.
Well, let's hope it lit a fire under him.
Because Joe, all the last storms lit a fire under them too. Huh?
Eversource got caught unaware, huh?
Okay, so that's, I think we're up on YouTube. John, if you can just confirm that. Admitting game. John, are we live on YouTube?
Guys,
It looks like, no, mine's saying live on YouTube.
yeah,
Yeah, mine did too, but it said that before and it didn't tape once.
Oh, okay.
I see it up.
You see it? Okay. And what I'll do is I will also record just as a backup. Oh, someone hammering? All right, just a sec here. And then I'll get ready to start. Okay. It is 7:01 and I'm going to call to order the Board of Education special meeting of August 6, 2020. To start, I'm going to do a roll call of Board of Education members. Please unmute yourself to acknowledge that you are on. Karina Drake, I don't believe could join us tonight. Liz Flugel. I see her. Nora Gatos.
Here.
Kathleen Holes.
Here.
Rachel Ruggieri.
Here.
Sean McAvoy. Sean, I think I saw you.
Oh.
Yep, there he is. Okay. Ken Joberg.
Here.
Jonathan Steckler. I don't believe was able to get in yet. He may join us in progress, and myself, Margaret Stamatis. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website afterwards, or on our YouTube channel afterwards. Members of the public have the ability to watch this meeting through a live stream on our Board of Ed YouTube channel, accessible through the district website. Since this is a special meeting of the board, there is no public comment or reports. So before we dig into the discussion items, just a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank board members and your staff and the staff for the problem solving during this challenging time after the tropical storm, trying to figure out ways to make tonight's meeting happen. I know this is an extremely important topic that we wanted to communicate to families and staff as soon as possible, but I acknowledge that the power outages provided a real challenge this week, as is evidenced by everybody in their backyards and sitting on generators. I also hope that our community and families have stayed safe after this storm and that power and internet are restored soon. Secondly, I know I mentioned in our last Board of Education meeting that we'd be moving to an in-person meetings. Well, that was not quite as simple as it seems, and this explanation is as much for the public as it is for our board. While we desire to move to in-person meetings, the board must work within rules around our meetings that involve public health guidance and statutory requirements such as FOIA. The rules for public agencies are different than the state COVID rules for schools. In trying to determine what we can do regarding meetings, we continue to seek input from the local public health director, district facilities and technology departments, our attorney, the first selectman and CABE, as well as checking state guidelines, executive orders, and consulting with leadership in other Connecticut districts. So in a nutshell, if the board is meeting in person, we've received guidance that the public must be allowed to be there in person as well, and not in a hybrid for public comment. There is a difference of legal opinion on this that we are trying to work through at the moment. But assuming that's the case, the Board of Education room at Town Hall Annex can probably seat about 15 people at least 6 feet apart when we meet. That just about covers the board and the administration who typically attend our meetings at the table. So the challenge is with having the public in the room with us is in the audience to watch a meeting or to make public comment, because we just don't have the socially distanced room in the annex. Moving locations to a larger facility to allow for more people who are social distanced carries a separate set of challenges. So we're working through all these questions, and we anticipate that we will be in person on Monday evening during our 8:00 p.m. meeting. Since that's a special board meeting, there is no public comment. Whether we're virtual or in person for any of these meetings, our meetings continue to be live streamed as they were before COVID, so the public can continue to view them live as well as accessible on our channel after the fact. All right, so with that, I'll move on to the first agenda item, discussion, the update on the reopening plan, athletics and expenses. Dr. De Silva will walk us through the updates to the district's reopening plan. Just a reminder that there will be no board action tonight, but we encourage board members to ask questions and to feel free to express their thoughts. Dr. De Silva?
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Hanaway is going to share her screen. So I'll give her a minute to do that. Good evening to everyone, and thank you for allowing us another opportunity to speak about our reopening plan. And I just want 1 second to fix my screen here. Okay. And again, just like Ms. D'Amatis mentioned, I'm glad that everyone is here and safe, and hopefully everyone in the public is as well. So again, good evening. Tonight's agenda is going to focus on what has transpired since our last meeting on July 22nd. We will share our reopening plan for fall 2020, pre-K to 8, and then grades 9 through 12. We will define low, moderate, and high risk, and also provide an update on athletics, technology, and expenses. Joining us tonight as well is Dane Street and Wes DeSantis and Dawn to speak of those expenses. All right, so since we last met on July 22nd, you may remember at that time, the Commissioner of Education had indicated that we were expected to create an experience for students that was 5 full days. In fact, on July 21st, the Commissioner sent a letter to all school districts indicating that if we did not create those experiences and provide them at the timing in which they were appropriate to do, that we would not be complying with the law. That was specific to a low risk scenario. As you've also likely been following, there have been significant changes since that meeting. A week ago this past Monday, I had the opportunity alongside other Durg A superintendents to share our concerns, in particular around our ability to attain 3 to 6 feet social distancing in our classrooms, that's K-12, as well as our ability to cohort at the high school grades 9 through 12, in particular for the purpose of contact tracing. At this time, and then since that time, after us sharing our concerns, you may also remember that the governor had a press release where he discussed superintendents having some flexibility on how they would reopen schools. At this time, I think it is important for our families to know that across our classrooms, should all of our children come to school, there are some classrooms, depending upon class size, that we don't have the ability to attain 3 feet of social distancing. Again, that's not in every single classroom in every single school. It does depend on the number of students and the school. So since that meeting and since the press conference, the governor and the Commissioner of Education has provided an update with respect to flexibility and saying that superintendents would be allowed to decide how their school districts will open. That said, the governor had also indicated that school districts, if they were to receive funding, and we don't know what that funding is, that schools that chose not to open fully would have a difference in funding. And I'll speak to that in a moment. In addition to that, both governor and commissioner did say that schools participating in hybrid models, those hours that children are in a hybrid model would count towards the 900-hour requirement. You may remember that on July 22nd, in fact, I think it was Ms. Drake who asked the question whether or not we would be able to attain the 900 hours, even if we had the reduction of the number of minutes, both 20 minutes at the start and 20 minutes at the end, and if we were to go into a hybrid model. And so since that time, the governor and the commissioner did indicate to us that we would have flexibility with that 900 hours, and children in a hybrid model where they were attaining remote learning would count towards the 900 hours. We're going to go through the presentation and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. I should have mentioned that earlier. So in terms of the reopening plan, we have 3 scenarios. One for, and this is in a low risk scenario. So as of right now, and Dr. Hanaway will speak to it in a minute, but as of right now, we're planning as if we're in a low risk model. So for pre-K, we're expecting that we would fully reopen 5 days a week in person beginning September 3rd. That's actually the first day for preschool. For our grades K through 5, we would begin in a hybrid model until September 29th. So that's considered a transition to full. And according to the governor and the commissioner, a transition to full is a full experience, even though it's a hybrid initially. And what that means is if we were to receive funding, our pre-K 8 would be considered a full. And the reason that we're looking for a hybrid model September 29th is varied, or until September 29th is varied. First of all, we have children that are coming in and being acclimated to school for the first time. Let's just say our kindergarten children. Our children grades 1 through 8 are coming back with new health and safety protocols, school routines and structures. In addition to that, we want the opportunity to teach our children the platform using both in school, the platform that we're going to use both in school and remotely. And so by reducing the number of students coming into school, it allows us to provide that structure, the routines, the transitions that our children need specifically if in the event that they should be put in the position to go to a hybrid or perhaps even a remote learning experience. So we want them to have an opportunity to practice, transition, have the tools available to them in a smaller teacher to student ratio. In addition to that, it allows for a building of confidence on the part of our children, on the part of our teachers, as to when we do come to a full experience, they know what it looks like in the smaller model and then transitioning to the full. We would resume full in-person programming on Tuesday, September 29th. That's after the last holiday. And so what that would mean is we would have approximately 4 weeks where children would be in a hybrid. Parents still do have the option to temporary remote learn at any point. So that means if they're not comfortable with the hybrid experience, the state has required that we offer parents a temporary remote learning option at any point, and parents may still do that right from the get-go for pre-K to 5. In grades 6 through 8, similar to our K through 5, our children are going to come in the hybrid model up until September 29th for the same purpose. They too will resume full in person on Tuesday, September 29th, and parents can also opt for the temporary remote learning at any point. Grades 9 through 12 stay in a hybrid throughout the first quarter. So the first quarter ends October 30th. And at that point, we'll reassess to determine whether or not we can bring students back, understand what's happening in the health world and what we might be learning about cohorting or contact tracing. So our grades 9 through 12 will be in a hybrid through the first quarter ending October 30th and then reassessing. Of course, even with the pre-K to 8, we may determine that we need to reassess the decision for September 29th, but this is how we would like to begin the school experience again. Transition to full. So why are we making these changes? We aim to design a plan that does not give students, staff, and parents the whiplash that we've experienced with the state the last 2 weeks. We believe that the design of this plan honors what we know to be the case right now. This is a changing dynamic quite literally from day to day. Each day we have a plan, it seems that we learn something new or receive new information that requires adjustments. So ultimately, we believe that this plan right now would allow our staff, our students, and our parents to have something to start with and allow us to start operationalizing. As we implement our plan, we uncover a myriad of other items that need to be addressed. The one thing that we learned from this past spring is that we need to teach the students how to engage with the new platforms in a controlled manner, not once we find ourselves in a moderate or high risk scenario. So we don't want to be in the position where all of a sudden we're in a hybrid and our children don't know how to use the platforms, in particular our primary children. So the hybrid model the hybrid model at onset allows us to give us some practice. And certainly in the high risk scenario where children are remote learning each day, they'll have had an opportunity to practice. And we believe this for all of our students, but in particular for our K-8, that they need time to learn how to engage in those online platforms, in addition to the health and safety protocols and the changes in the structure of this day. So this is the learning that should happen with their teachers in an explicit and developmentally appropriate way, using the month of September to provide for the acclimation time we believe is in the best interest of our students and our staff. Our staff needs to build the confidence as well that they can do this, that we can manage it. And should we return to a moderate or high risk at any point, that we've all become acclimated. For RHS, we already believe that the hybrid model was and continues to be the most appropriate way due to the inability to cohort and simply the size of the cohorting. K-8 can cohort due to their class designs, as the primary purpose of cohorting, again, is to reduce the new spread of germs and contact tracing. And mask wearing continues to be the most critical health and safety mitigating measure and will be used across every group across the child's day. I will transition over to Dr. Hanaway to talk about some of the changes in our hybrid model that were revised from our first conversation on the 22nd.
Okay, thanks, Susie. So a change to what we had presented on the 22nd of July is the actual schedule for the hybrid model. We received a lot of feedback from the community and also from staff and administration about the pluses and minuses of what we call the A-B cycle within a hybrid. So what I mean by that is, if you consider a hybrid as looking at two groups, Group A and Group B, and you're splitting your population about 50%. So in our original plan, we had a AB model, meaning students would come in every other day. What we're now proposing is an AABB model. And in a low risk scenario, this would mean that students would attend school on Wednesdays. And in a moderate risk scenario, an AABB would still mean that the school building is closed for deep cleaning on Wednesdays. In the low risk model, which is where we are right now and where we believe we'll start for that month of September, the AABB will allow students for 3 consecutive days of in-person instruction every other week. Now, the added wrinkle in terms of our calendar is that we have 2 Mondays off in September. And so we have to adjust those weekly schedules. So students will have 2 days in and 2 days out because it's a shortened week. And in a moderate risk model, the AABB will allow for a true cleaning, so to speak, between groups on Wednesdays. So Group A will come in for Monday, Tuesday, and then the cleaning will happen before Group B has any exposure in the building. In the low risk model, what we really were trying to balance is instructional continuity with safety, and then understanding that if we were to move to a moderate risk model, that would mean that the COVID spread would increase in the community, and the AABB would allow for that true cleaning on Wednesdays, where an AB model wouldn't necessarily do that. The hybrid model in this way would run 2 weeks for one cycle, week 1 and week 2 making up one cycle. I can show you what that looks like. So as you can see here, in week 1, Group A is in person Mondays and Tuesdays, while Group B is remote learning using live streaming and other modalities. And then Group A is remote learning Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, while Group B will be in person. Following week, they'll switch. Group A would be in person Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then remote Thursday, Friday. And week 2, Group B would be remote Monday through Wednesday, and then in person Thursday, Friday. And so here, what we're really looking at is continuity, and days in a row we think does make a difference for that. Excuse me. This is what the month of September would look like. Knowing that we're starting on a Thursday, we'd bring each group in Thursday, Friday, and then the weeks would play out here. Susie, would you jump in the moderate risk while I take a sip of water?
Sure. Hang on, let me just get to that. So in the reopening hybrid schedule in the moderate risk, the significant change is the Wednesdays. And so on the Wednesdays, what you'll notice is Monday, Tuesday, again, group A is coming in person. Our group B is remote. On Wednesdays, both groups stay home. Again, this is K-12. We have our deep cleaning done in the moderate model. Thursday, Friday, group A students are remote learning and group B students are in person. Again, giving group B an opportunity to return after the deep cleaning on the Wednesday. Do you want me to keep going? Yep.
Yeah, I can jump back in. Hopefully I don't get another coughing attack. So the full 2-week hybrid would start on the 31st of August, which is our first full week of school. The first 2 days of school, which is a Thursday and a Friday, will offer the opportunity for each group to attend in person 1 day. Our kindergarten will have half days until the 4th of September, which is typical for the start of the school year for kindergarten. We typically start in half days to help those students acclimate to a full day. And that has been the case since we transitioned from the half day to the full day kindergarten a few years ago. And as Susie said earlier, the low risk hybrid model would be reassessed on a quarterly basis. And we counted at the quarter the amount of days that the A group and the B group would have in person in the building, just to make sure that the count gets balanced. And it is balanced. It's not identical because in some cases there's an odd number of days within that quarter, but the students would have an equitable balance of in-person days in the building and remote days at home. Okay, last week, and I apologize for the brightness of this graphic. This is a graphic that was created by the state of Connecticut that we thought would be smartest to use. So last week, the state defined low, moderate, and high risk. And low risk, which is this yellow here, is there's a leading indicator and secondary indicators. The leading indicator is that there are less than 10 new COVID cases per 100,000 person population. Now, Ridgefield doesn't have 100,000 residents. So this would have to be a regional based assessment. There's no way. Otherwise, it's an inflated number. And the secondary indicator in that low risk is that the trend is either down to flat, and there's no statistically significant changes, which I think is what I understand from the public health director is 5%. At the moderate risk level, that would be 10 to 25 new cases within that regional 100,000 person population, and that the trending is flat to upward, and that there are any statistically significant changes. And then at the high risk level, you're looking at more than 25 new COVID cases in a day per 100,000 people, and that the trend is upward with consistently statistically significant changes. Before I move to the next slide, at this point, we have not been given information as to how that regionalized data collection is going to work through the public health department. But that is not going to be, in my understanding of what I've read, necessarily a district to district sharing of information, school district to school district, as much as it is public health department to public health. As of last week, this was the current status of indicators by county in the state of Connecticut. The first row here is Connecticut, and the next one down is Fairfield County. So we do have the highest increasing status in the state right now, which is still very low. We average in the county 2.5 new COVID cases per day per 100,000 people. And the percent of people who take the test who are positive is at 1.4%. The state average is listed up here at the top, which is why we continue to be at this yellow low risk category. So once this were to get to this number 2.5 were to get to 10 is when it might change its risk status. Is Dane on with us right now?
Yes. Dane, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Can we turn it over to you for an update on athletics?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone survived the storm and is hopefully going to have power and internet back soon. It makes our work much easier when that's the case. Just wanted to give a quick update in regards to athletics. And as you can see on the slide there, just 3 different areas that I wanted to let the board members know about this evening. The first one is an update on our summer strength and conditioning that has been ongoing since July 6th. So we have a plan that was in place. We began on July 6th, following the CIEC guidelines in terms of allowing kids to come in small groups to do strength and conditioning work. That work has all been taking place outside. We have very clear protocols in terms of mask wearing, cleaning of equipment, where they're supposed to be on the field. All of those things are in place. And I'm happy to say that we've had 0 incidents over the course of the last month when it comes to that program. So we've had upwards of 140 athletes taking part. And that runs Monday through Saturday. And so to me, that's a good sign that we are able to put in a plan in place and execute it without any sort of a flare up. The next phase has always been contingent on the latest information from the CIAC, which some of you may have seen came out last week. And so it calls for basically an extended preseason. So over the next month, from beginning on Monday and then running all the way through September 10th, we have an opportunity to begin some more advanced strength and conditioning, trying to get kids re-socialized, reacclimated to working out, and get them in shape so that they are ready for the season to begin. For those familiar with athletics, you'll recognize that September 10th date is much later than you would normally see for the start of sports. And so officially the first start date in terms of tryouts now is September 11th for all fall sports. So in the meantime, they have given us the opportunity to increase our cohort size. So during the first part of our summer, our cohort sizes were limited to 10 athletes. We are now able to bump that number up to 15 athletes per cohort. And as we work through the next few weeks, coaches are allowed to begin, fall coaches, I should clarify, are allowed to begin working with their athletes and incorporating sport-specific activities. Whereas during the summer, it was really just strength and conditioning general for all athletes. Now they can begin to, hit the field hockey ball or, run passing routes for the football team or whatever the sport-specific stuff is. So the actual season itself has been pushed back. The CIAC released their plan that again, so the first date for tryouts would be September 11th and 12th. The first contests would take place on September 24th, and the season itself has been shortened so that most sports that would typically have, say, 16 games in a field hockey season or a boys or girls soccer season, that limit will now be 12 games. So some of the work that's going on right now within the leagues is to develop those new schedules and what they might look like. I'll take, for instance, our field hockey team. In the past, we've had 14 games within the FCAC. We've had 2 games against external opponents in other leagues that we could pick up whoever we wanted. Going forward, the plan is we would be competing almost exclusively within the FCAC. And so the idea there is to minimize the amount of travel, and if there were some sort of an exposure, keeping that geographically based. So that work is ongoing. We don't know exactly what the schedules will look like as of yet, but the FCAC is developing our own league schedule to fill those new requirements from the CIAC. One of the other pieces that's worth mentioning in terms of scheduling is we're still not sure what sort of challenges we might face when it comes to transportation. And so within the FCAC, we are looking at the possibility to schedule more sub-varsity events on weekends. And so that would minimize the amount of travel that would be required during the week, which hopefully would lessen the burden on our bus company in terms of cleaning of buses and things of that nature. So those are other things that are being explored right now. We have some draft plans in the works for JV and freshman sports in several of our fall sports to happen almost exclusively on the weekends. As for what's next for us, as soon as Power School rolls over, which I believe is going to be happening next week, we would open our registration window and we would get to work. It's not new for athletics to kind of be leading the charge into each school year. And so this year will be no different. So we will continue with our strength and conditioning work over the next few weeks. We are in the process of finalizing our coach hires. We had a couple of last minute departures that were unexpected, but we've got some interviews set up and that work is ongoing. And then we'll just continue to monitor the plans as we get towards the start of the school year and the official start of sports on September 11th. There's a lot that's still unknown. And as Dr. De Silva mentioned earlier, it literally does change day to day. And so we'll continue to follow the latest guidelines from the CIAC and monitor and adjust our plan accordingly. Some of the questions that are out there that still need to be decided on, as I mentioned, schedules are still being finalized. Transportation is a question that we will probably revisit in terms of what is needed and whether or not we want to change our standard protocols in terms of having kids travel on buses, or if we schedule regionally and we want to have parents drive kids to events, those sorts of things to make that a little bit easier. Fan attendance is a big question mark across the state right now. If we do have games, are we going to allow spectators? And so those are all things that we'll continue to analyze. Lastly, I would say that the CIAC recommended that each district put together a COVID-19 advisory committee specifically to answer some of these athletics questions. And so we're in the process of doing that as well. So that would include Dr. De Silva, Dr. Greenwood from the high school, as well as myself, our athletic trainer, our school physician, other medical professionals to weigh in on our plan and continue to keep an eye on it as we head towards the start of the season. So that's the work that we have ongoing in the athletic department.
Wes, you ready to turn it over to technology?
Absolutely. All right. So the first thing that we began doing when we realized that we're going to have these 3 different learning models is the bandwidth upgrade. That should be happening hopefully the end of next week. A lot of things were supposed to happen this week, but because of the storm, a lot of the Xfinity crews and the other companies that we use to outsource a lot of this, they're just all busy. So we're hoping the bandwidth upgrades will be happening last week. We will be installing digital technology across over, I think, 130 learning spaces. So both middle schools will have ViewSonic touch boards. We're hoping by the beginning of actual school starting. They're going to start installing them at the end of next week. Again, everything got pushed back a week, but the ViewSonic boards will be put into any learning spaces that need them in the elementary schools and the high school secondary. Right now, we don't have any digital touch technologies in the middle schools at all, so they get first wave of installs. Webcams are on track to arrive next week. The webcams are actually at our CBS distributor in Connecticut, all 500 of them. We were able to secure them. They would have been delivered tomorrow, but the storm has kind of slowed everything down. So we're hoping to have them in by Monday, Tuesday. That means that we'll be also getting ready to, we actually did do beta testing with students with the streaming setup that we're using with the webcams and the cabling and how we're going to be using Google Meet and other interactive services. And it worked well with the students. The students liked it. They were able to hear the teacher well. The microphones worked great. They were able to see the touch device very well. They actually really liked it because that way they can actually take it digitally onto Google Classroom instantly and just have it for later use. The reopening website is on track. I'm working with Dr. Hanaway and company to get everyone part of the reopening committee to kind of put in all the stuff that needs to be on the reopening website. It's going to be very easy to navigate. It's going to have broken down into about big areas that are going to take you right to, I need to know about scheduling. I need to know about transportation. There's about eight major things. So it'll be very easy to navigate. And also because, we're here to meet about the change in schedule, we will have lots of time for teachers to get in the classroom, work with all these materials, have them have time to work with our systems that are going to be new, that are addition to Google Classroom, which will be Schoology for K through 12 and Seesaw, which will be K through 5. And we want teachers to have a very, in-depth amount of time to play with it, be able to adapt to their time, give department heads a lot of time to learn the new systems and the camera systems. And last but not least, I'm going to actually work with Dr. Hanaway directly to activate Windows for her. So.
Wes, I'm not sure if anyone else got that joke.
Yes,
got the joke. There's a little icon on the bottom of Dr. Hanaway's screen that says activate Windows. Go to settings to activate Windows. Wes.
I'm not moving it just for you, Wes. It's
Yes,
going to stay there forever.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to turn it over to Dawn to discuss the fun part about expenses, the expenses that we have thus far and the ones that we're anticipating, although some of these expenses may actually change. You might remember some of these from our last meeting on July 22nd. I know that I also shared with you that the low risk scenario, meaning full opening, I hate to say it this way, but was by far the most expensive. Because we're in a hybrid and we'll be transitioning into a full experience, some of these expenses may still be there, but there are some that we're reconsidering. So I'll let Dawn speak to them initially, and then I'll pop in to just add some color. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you. Most importantly, in order for all of that great work that you just heard about to happen, it costs money, whether it's salaries for personnel to help keep our students safe, or supplies, personal protection equipment, or supplies that are needed for keeping our buildings clean and safe for staff and students to be there. So far, we have spent $627,203. 331 of that was on personal protection equipment. We have 77,000 that we've spent on facilities for signage, cleaning supplies, plexiglass, various things in order to get the buildings ready and safe for the return of students and staff. In technology, we spent 352,720 for a lot of what Wes was talking about, the webcams, the connectivity, the smart boards that we needed to get so that virtual and distance and in-class learning could happen all at once. And then in curriculum, we spent $65,495, and that's for preparing the distance learning students with the materials that they need in order to connect in and participate in the classes. As Dr. DeSilva was saying, we have some anticipated expenses, and this is where our larger expenses are. And these expenses are still being discussed and looked at. But to give you an idea, health office paraprofessionals, $275,000. That would be one paraprofessional for each elementary school. Bus monitors, we're looking at the first 30 days to put on a bus monitor to monitor the students to keep all those that are riding safe, $105,000. Building substitutes, $58,610. We're anticipating or starting to look at 2 elementary, 3 in the middle school, and 3 in the high school. And this is to cover teacher and para absences. Custodial overtime, it depends on the scenario that's used.
Dawn, you froze. I'll take it here. So the custodial overtime, when she said depends on the scenario that's used, should we require that a deep clean happens on Saturdays? And at this point, in the low risk hybrid model, it does not indicate to us that we would need this. So I'll get to that in just one second. Partitions, we have estimated at $20,000. Training materials, which is signage for guidance for evacuation drills, an estimate is $15,000. Joe Moritz has been working hard to look at our spaces and our ability to have tents in certain spaces and what sizes actually make sense for our ability to distance, but also the size of our campuses and also the takedown and put up. Washing stations, the cost of 25 of them, and then cleaning supplies and equipment, about $66,000. So the 2 expenses here that I think are the ones that are most flexible is that custodial overtime. When I say most flexible, it depends on where we are in terms of a model. The custodial overtime with the deep cleaning on Saturdays. If we don't need to deep clean on Saturdays, that cost is gone. And we have been discussing the need for the bus monitors for those first 30 days. And I think ultimately that decision will be based on surveying the families to identify how many of the families will be seeking out transportation and how many are going to prefer to drive. Again, it doesn't mean that we won't be required to provide transportation if a parent decides to change their mind. But ultimately, if we know that we're only going to have 15 children on a bus run, and we've done a good enough job with the teaching of our children with videos, etc., perhaps that's an expense that we can defer. In terms of the health office paraprofessionals, we're working with Aaron Crook to make a determination if that is necessary. And as of right now, at each of the elementary schools, he feels strongly that the containment rooms will require another adult because they are a separate space. Whether that adult can be used to help supervise students in terms of social distancing, that may be the case, but he does feel pretty strongly that that number is there. So the two numbers that I think are the most flexible are the bus monitors at this point and the custodial overtime. There isn't a doubt that we're going to need the building substitutes. Whether or not we can actually get them is a bigger question, because quite frankly, we can't get building subs on a good day. And with some of the health issues that are out there, naturally, folks that might be retired and wanting to put in a day or two may not be so excited to do so. So that's where we are with costs. I don't think that Dawn's been able to make her way back, but I'll take questions on that in a minute. And I think the last slide opens it up to questions, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that I don't want to neglect to speak to. Just with respect to sports, for the public that's listening, I've had the opportunity to watch our children recondition over at the high school, and I can share Dane's sentiment that they're clearly taking this really seriously. And you can see the coaches, the kids, it's important to them, and I know it's important to them, and they know that the privilege that they have to be out there and conditioning their body with their teammates. We should all be very proud of our children. I don't know our children well enough, but I can certainly say that we should all be proud of them. The temporary home learning option that I discussed at the beginning of our presentation, that is available to all students K-12 if parents elect that option. And that may take them a little time to decide, right? They may have to decide that for lots of different reasons, but that will be available actually in a link in my Friday communication tomorrow, but will also be available on the website and the district website at some point tomorrow. So they can check the district website at some point during the day, or at minimum, you'll get my Friday communication in the afternoon, and you can link and make that decision. At any point, a parent can make a change from the temporary home learning option to coming back to the physical school experience. We are asking parents to give us 72 hours notice so that we can plan and our teachers can plan appropriately, because we had to be reminded, just like the spring, this experience is new for our teachers as well. So not only did they have to get used to and had to get used to a remote experience, they're going to be getting accustomed to a live experience. But in addition to that, they have two groups of children, and some are virtual and some are not. And navigating that is going to take time. So as much as our families can give us notice, I think it's really important that they do so for lots of different reasons, but to ensure all of the kids that are at school, the kids that are digital, have the best experience possible. I'll talk about the calendar. Well, why don't I talk about the calendar now? I know you're going to get to the calendar in a minute because it does influence some of our conversations as part of this presentation. So I think first and foremost, our children are starting on the 27th, which never changed. So that was our original school day, and that's what we stuck to. And let me explain why that is. Some school districts decided that, as you know, the Commissioner of Education allowed school districts to reduce the school year for children by 3 days. So we're required by law to have 180 school days. Ridgefield has 181. They allowed us to reduce the 180-day requirement by 3 days, only if you added professional learning for faculty to the start of the school year. So our thinking was not to reduce the school year. We don't have a lot of our children for a long time. We know that from the spring. We didn't have a lot of days, and we didn't want to reduce the school year for kids. So that was number one. So then we looked at, well, what could we reduce? Our children are not in school on November 3rd, and they're not in school on February 16th, but our faculty was. So we did feel the need to have our faculty in district earlier than anticipated to provide additional professional learning, but we didn't want our children's school year reduced. So we gave our faculty back 2 days, November and February, and brought them in earlier. So with this calendar, our faculty is returning earlier than originally planned. They were anticipated arriving on the 21st, August 21st, it's a Friday. We're now asking them to come back on a Wednesday on the 19th. So they're coming back 2 days earlier. We're replacing 2 days of professional learning that they would have had in November and in February. So do I believe that professional learning is important? Of course I do, but we also have built into our teacher's contract an extended workday, 1 hour per week. We will maximize that time with our faculty in addition to their common planning time that's already built into their school day. So that's the reason that we're starting August 27th. You may notice that some districts around us have later start dates. They already had later start dates, and then they reduced the calendar for children by 3 days. So that's the reason that you might see some school districts starting, let's say September 8th or September 3rd. So that's one of the differences between us and between them. And just remember, teacher contracts are different across our region. And so their ability to do things is different than our ability to do things, and vice versa. So that is our recommendation. We realize that some teachers may be on holiday or have prepared holiday on those dates. And obviously this is last minute, it's August 6th, and we understand that. We will work with those teachers to ensure that whatever professional learning they're missing, that they will have. We had a great conversation today around the professional learning that our teachers will be receiving, but we do feel like we have now 6 days. 1 day is a teacher classroom day, but we have 6 full days with our faculty, whether it's to prepare their classroom or to give them professional learning, or to support teachers in how they will be presenting the first couple of weeks of school for children, because that's an important piece as well. What are those first 2 weeks of school going to look like for kids when you have a group of children here on your screen and a group of children there? Because we do have to maximize what that's going to look like, because at any given moment, we may be in a position where we don't have children at all and we're in a remote experience. So I felt like that was important to mention now. I know the calendar comes next, but just so that you can see the larger picture of why the calendar looks the way that it looks. And so now I'll open it up to questions. But actually, before I do that, I want to say this, is that we here in Ridgefield are doing our best. I know every other community is doing their best. We don't have the answers to everything. There aren't best practices with a lot of what we're doing, right? So we're learning distance learning like everybody else is. We're learning hybrid like everybody else is. It's a new school experience. And I imagine that all along the way, we're going to be making modifications and adjustments, because that's what good teachers do. They learn from what's in front of them and they make adjustments. Earlier today, I experienced a part physical meeting, part phone meeting, part computer meeting. It added its own level of challenge, right? And one of the mistakes that I made was that I didn't establish the rules of engagement. So for my folks that are on a screen, I need to be able to teach you, like, what happens? When do you mute? When do you not mute? When do you raise your hand? When do you chat? When you're on the phone, same thing. Those are things that our teachers are going to need to do with our children from the get-go. And our teachers don't necessarily have that toolkit. So those 6 days at the start of the school year are incredibly important. We're going to make mistakes. It's new to all of us, just like every other community is. Are these the best decisions that we can make based on the information that we have at this time? I think that they are. Is it perfect? It isn't. we're learning each day with new information that we're receiving, whether it's from our local health department, the state health department, the commissioner, the governor. We're taking it all in. And as I said before, like a good teacher does, we monitor and adjust as appropriate. So now for real, I will take questions, and so will my colleagues.
Okay, we'll open up to, Liz, did I just see your hand? We'll have you go first.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? I'm on headset and laptop, so I have my own set of challenges. Well, thank you for that. I think it's a great adjustment set. I have a couple of pretty tactical questions, so and then I have a financial one. So I'm going to lay them all out, and then you guys can either jot them down and address them later, or then I can just take the floor once if that's all right.
Sure.
The first one is freshman first day. We used to have a day that the freshmen would go in at RHS to get accustomed to the school. Is that still happening? I didn't see that on the dates.
Yes, I believe that still is. And I would have, yes, I believe, Liz confirmed that, but I believe that we did have our freshmen coming in. It's K-9, and then 10 through 12 come in the following day. So the 27th, Liz?
Both cohorts will go in for freshmen, or freshmen all one cohort?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think that second piece is where the high school is trying to figure that out, is
Okay.
because normally they would do it in one day.
Yeah.
And what they don't want to do is delay two full days of instruction. So I think they're still trying to figure out if they can make that work. I don't think that they've determined that they can, but also haven't rolled it out yet. So they're going to have to follow up with families about that.
But Ms. Vogel, you bring up a good point, and all of the questions that you'll all ask tonight, I think are important because the public needs to hear those questions, and we need to be sure that we're answering them. But a lot of the small details will be coming out before August 14th, which will help parents, I think, even in their decision-making of what's right for their family, or perhaps what questions they still may have. Okay,
Yep.
So we'll get back to you on that.
All right, so the second question I have is sibling cohorts. So we have lots and lots of families with multiple children in multiple schools and multiple grades. Is there a consideration being done by the groups to ensure that siblings are together or not together, or what the plan is there, especially as that starts to relate to transportation and busing situations? If people are driving, you don't want them driving every day. You'd rather have them, I would assume, driving with the same family in the car. So have you thought about that in terms of the impact on transportation as well?
So the answer to that is yes. And so some of the alphabetical principle, let's just say as an example, doesn't always evenly split, right? So A through M in one particular school may not give you an equal number at one particular class, may not give you an equal number as another class, right? Or another school. So while we are going to make it a decision around cohorts and siblings, we may have to modify and adjust kids. So if you're an M kid at Veterans Park in group A, you may be an M kid in group B at, let's say, Scottsbridge Middle School. So there is monitoring and adjusting for siblings. And we've had requests to have siblings separated, ironically.
And the building administrators have started to work through their communication with each other. So that they're on the same page. Obviously, we can just look things up in Power School, but that's not nearly as efficient. But we've already started to run reports through Power School of every, kids in each grade and who has siblings, and linking up with the schools.
Siblings who have different last names, right?
Right.
So,
right.
So that's fun.
Yeah.
I hope you have a good data analyst, Wes. Okay, so a couple more questions, really. One, I'd like a little bit more clarity on the bus monitor role in the whole transportation process and what the impact is expected to be there, and how much flexibility we have with the bus company, given their contract, and just a little bit more clarity on what the expectations are from the state. We're under this rule of transportation, both internal and external to RPS. And so I'd just like a little bit more clarity on what the plan is with the bus company. Are we able to now opt out families who want to drive, who aren't interested formally? I know we were talking about that. So it's more of a general question of how are we working through the busing? I wasn't quite clear on that.
So Ms. Vogel, let me work through some of the pieces that I know, and then I'll give Ms. Norton, who's back, some for her. So with respect to the bus monitors, Naturally, in a full reopening, especially if all children were coming to school, let's say those first 30 days, that's what we were initially thinking in terms of cost. We would reduce the cost of bus monitors by just doing 30 days. Now that we have smaller cohorts of students, right? So let's just say it's half, and let's say even in that half, some parents opt out of transportation, you may even have less. So we are creating videos, right? Pre-teaching videos for our kids that will be sent home to families, will be distributed in lots of different ways to get kids accustomed to what the expectations are on the bus. Naturally, it's very different with 30 kids on a bus versus 72. So it's far more manageable. Again, this is all new information. So we had to come together as a team to see if it makes sense, if we all still agree that we can do this safely, that we can manage it. If we can, then we're going to look to not bring in the bus monitors for the hybrid low risk model.
Okay.
Interestingly enough that you bring up the bus piece, because just this week, we actually received an invoice from the bus company, as many districts do, in terms of the cost associated with the cleaning of the bus that now we will have to incur. And so my natural question was like, well, why should we incur that, right? Why shouldn't it be their responsibility? But it does appear that there is a cost associated to their contract that comes with cleaning that wasn't in their original contract. Okay. With respect to routes, which I think is another part of your question for those parents that opt out, yeah. I'll turn that over to Dawn. But one thing that we all have to remember is, even if a parent opts out today, if tomorrow they say they need a school bus to come to school, we have to reroute to pick up that child. So that is our obligation by law. Dawn?
That's what I wondered, is if anybody from the legislature done anything about that? Have they said anything to that effect? Should we be starting to bang the drum that perhaps this year we need a special dispensation on that?
I don't know if anyone's beat the drum, but they have been very clear in the superintendent meetings with the Commissioner of Education that we are obligated by law to provide transportation. Similarly, actually, we asked the question about the temporary remote learning, because albeit we want that choice to be available for parents, we don't want the back and forth, because it's incredibly disruptive to our teachers and to our children. And ultimately, we really don't have, at this point, that drum may be beating, but at this point, we don't have the ability to say 45 days. We can recommend it, or 20 days, but what we're recommending is at least 72 hours. Dawn, did you want to add anything on the bus routes that I may have missed?
No, I don't think you've missed anything at all on that. There isn't really much legislation that's come down on busing, other than we do have to provide busing for all students at all times, regardless of whether or not they come to school or don't come to school. We do have the bus company that is part of the opening committee, and they are in all of our meetings that has to do with busing, so that they're aware of the needs that the school has, the various levels that we might need, the changes that we might need, and they've been working very well with us.
Are they charging us for participation in those meetings, or are they doing it as part of their partnership? Okay, good.
They're doing it as part of the partnership.
Thank you. I have a few more questions, Margaret, but I'll speed if you want to let others.
No, go ahead. We'll make sure everybody gets a chance to ask all their questions. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I have an unrelated to bus question, security. You mentioned tents as the weather starts to get, obviously we've had a couple of recent events, but as the weather gets colder, there's that issue, but there's also security around tenting outside. And how have we thought about the offsets of having interior security versus exterior security? How are we keeping the kids safe?
So Liz, you bring up a good question. I think this is probably one of those questions that we might want to discuss in executive session when it comes around security. But naturally, that is something that we've been thinking about. And in terms of, what was the first part of your question, Liz?
Oh, I was talking about weather considerations with tents as well. So it's a little unrelated to the security part, but heating, cooling, that kind of thing. How do you decide once you get a logistics plan that includes a tent?
So yeah, so that's a question that we are also processing, and ultimately it can't be the only, it has to be a plan. And I think the plan, let's just say for music, right? That can be an option, but it can't be the only plan. And
Yeah.
so we're going to have to think about the plan B and the plan C. The other piece of it is, and Joe is on, but he may be away for a minute. The tents that we're looking to purchase do have the side
Good. Okay.
side panels, which will help with the weather. Obviously, we try to get kids out, as you know, if you have an elementary child, as much as possible, even when it's cold out.
Yeah.
Weather such as this, not so much, but weather like that, we do. I think the
Yeah.
opportunity for mask breaks outside, where kids can actually take off their mask and are distanced appropriately, will help with the tents. But I will say the challenge is actually even the tents that are available, which tents are available right now, and the size of them and where you can put them on campus, and your ability to take them down quickly and put them up if needed. So all of those variables are there, but that's where we are right now. I think security is a good conversation to have in executive session for sure.
Okay, so just one more. I have to always ask the money question. So 15,000 for signage seems like an awful lot of money when we have a lot of creativity in the community. That may be an opportunity to make a call out to our artist community that we live in, versus spending 15,000 on circles and things to stay social distance. As somebody who's gone back into my office and seen it all, I can tell you that, those are very pretty and consistent, but can probably be done and maybe in a more creative manner. So just an idea there. That seems like a lot to spend on that. And then I wonder if there's any cost offsets, because we do have some kids going in part-time. We do have some kids taking on remote learning. What I didn't see in any of these cost estimates was anything we don't need because of this. And I would encourage the team to start looking at that to see if there's anything we can do. I mean, these costs are huge to make sure we remediate, but I haven't seen anything on an offset cycle there.
Yeah. So Ms. Vogel, you bring up a good point. We actually, there will be some offsets, either by choice or not. We talked a little bit on July 22nd around professional development. It's interesting because we had a conversation today, it's going to come up, but the cost of parking, let's just say for high school children, right? So the park of costing right now actually helps us pay for our security officers, which we need. Probably even more so now, in particular, if the high school ends up with an open campus, which they may do, in order to reduce the number of students on campus, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're reducing the cost of busing because of parking because kids are only parking 2, possibly 3 days a week, how do we manage on the other end? So, and you're right, some things seem like they should be more economical in a hybrid, right? You're only taking half of the kit. Yeah. So interestingly enough, even lunches. So you bring up another good point. A lot of these details that we haven't ironed out, to be fair, but that we're processing. One is breakfast. So right now, we can't have our high schoolers because they're coming in. As you remember, we reduced the school day at the start and at the end so that students could report right to their classrooms. Well, now if they don't stop to pick up breakfast from Chartwell's, that's a revenue source that Chartwell's would have normally received. And because they can't take off their masks to eat breakfast in the hall or to eat it somewhere else, we have to say no breakfast, right? Or at least at this moment, that's what we're thinking. Again, these are all operational pieces that everybody's anxious to get to work with, but that right now seems like it should be an offset, but it's not. Right now, our elementary schools will be having their lunches, for example, delivered to their classroom. And because they had to be delivered in a box, and now staffing wise, you have to have them delivered to 4 different classrooms, right? The hot lunch has to be a particular temperature going from A to B. So all of these different complexities, it seems like it should be, well, we should be reducing costs somehow, right? They seem to be adding costs, and how we navigate this with cost savings, maybe some around professional development. My hope would have been substitutes, but now there's this added layer of staff, perhaps being sick, perhaps not being comfortable to come to work, being out for a particular amount of time, an FMLA or the extended leaves allowed by law now, and us having to pay someone for the sick time while also paying for a substitute. So we will have, technology is one I have to say that I've been looking very carefully at in terms of software, because if we're live streaming, how many students really need access to some of these other resources if they're already on the computer, 6 hours a day live streaming. I don't know if they need to be on iExcel for another hour after school. So those things we are looking at carefully because, as you can see, we're over budget already by $600,000. We're going to have to find it somewhere, but we'll continue to look.
Thank you. All right, I'm done finally. Thank you, Margaret.
Next. Kathleen, I see your hand.
Hi. Hopefully you can hear me over my generator. I'm outside. Anyway, first of all, thank you so much. It's wonderful all the work you've done. And I'm just going to ask a question because had anybody thought of taking even bigger baby steps, particularly a cushion to monitor as people return to the state and look at our figures, and understanding that perhaps to begin with a week or so, I'm not even going to say of just remote learning, so that the children and the teachers can all have formative assessment of how it works before you go then into the hybrid model. And I can think of a lot of things that we don't have to go to the whiplash that Susie was talking about.
So Kathleen, interesting that you bring that up, because originally you might remember that we had Wednesdays, and the moderate experience, Wednesdays was a quote unquote deep clean day. And our students were going to be remote learning on that Wednesday. And so, and in fact, if many districts kept that model. So you might be hearing other districts in this community. So I will say this, every district at one point or another was in a different spot, and they evolve even daily. I'll get an email from one district that say they're doing this, and then another district that's doing that. One district said they were all going in full, all of a sudden they're hybrid everywhere. So originally the Wednesday was a remote learning experience for students, and we had it as a deep cleaning day. When we learned that we had the flexibility, K-12 for a hybrid, I felt, I'll speak for myself and the committee agreed, I felt that I did not have the justification to not have children in schools an extra day in a low risk model. And why did I believe that? Because in theory, kids are already remote learning. We're teaching them. We have the ability to have half of the kids to teach them how to have that experience, that remote learning experience. So that's one of the reasons that I personally advocated to have students, the hybrid model continue into Wednesdays. If we were in the moderate risk scenario, we would of course use Wednesdays for that deep cleaning and then avoid the Saturdays, right, of the $690,000, or try to avoid them at least. But in this scenario right now, in the low risk model, I really want access to as many kids as I can safely, right? I think the team agrees, to be able to teach into the skills that they're going to need should we shift from hybrid to moderate and moderate to high. As for the other part of what you asked, Kathleen, is are we going to continue to monitor or to check or to transition in slowly? If at any point between the start and September 29th, we learn more information as we do each day, or our teachers are giving us feedback that requires that we make another shift. We don't want the whiplash, of course, but if there's something that's urgently telling us that we need to do something different, I would rather say we need to do something different because there's urgent information than continue down a path that doesn't make sense for our children, health and safety wise, or obviously educationally. But that's why we made the decision that we did.
I appreciate that. I was just thinking being more moderate and more conservative, but I understand your thinking completely. It was just a question I had is, can we bide a little more time to make sure that particularly our numbers in terms of infection are as low as they are. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate everything that you said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next board member, raise your hand. Go ahead, Nora. Oh, sorry. Go Go ahead,
Okay.
Nora, sorry.
Thanks. Well, first want to just thank the reopening committee and really applaud the kind of switch to the hybrid model, because I think that it really reflects the recommendations of the health experts to follow a phased reopening. So that I definitely agree with. I have a few questions sort of related to the high school. The first one is, you spoke, Dr. De Silva, in July about the block scheduling as a possibility. Is an RHS student going to have all 7 or so classes on a given day?
No. Go ahead, Liz, you're ready to jump in.
No, so no, they're not. It's going to be reduced to a 4-period block. And what's going to happen is that Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, they're going to have a consistency for their 4-period block. And then they're going to have a variation of that on Wednesdays. But they're not going to have a full 8-period block on any given day.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that, we usually get with an RHS student a schedule online when it comes out. And will the new schedule sort of reflect the days that the student is in and which classes they have on which day? And how will it be pretty clear for a parent to interpret?
I hope so. We're working right now through trying to figure out some of those details, meaning can we put in the cohort right in Power Schools? So when they go in and access, they can see what cohort they're a part of. If not, the high school, Dr. Green met with us this morning, is trying to operationalize and iron out all of the details. Our hope is somewhere around August 14th, families will have, if not sooner, we'll have all of those details, Nora, but it should be pretty clear.
Okay, and then I just had one more. Will the students who are distance learning in the hybrid model be able to interact, or are they solely observers? And if they are interacting, kind of what is the extent of that and how does that work?
So the first part is yes, they will be able to interact. The rules of engagement have not been determined yet, right? So we'll have to sort through what that looks like, whether the technology is going to be a hand, whether or not the teacher will have some type of protocol of some sort. But yes, they are not a sole observer. They will be a part of the classroom. Ideally, at the elementary level, even a part of a small group, if we can make that happen. But again, our goal is to have kids be engaged when they're remote learning in the hybrid model as much as a classmate would. Obviously, I think there's some differences in the physical world that aren't there in the digital world. You have the teacher right there. Their access is slightly different, but ultimately, yes, they would be engaging like our students that are in the physical world.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things with that, Nora, that we're still operationalizing and learning is what the anatomy or the structure looks like, right? In a block or even at the elementary level. So when I teach for 15 minutes, the synchronous versus asynchronous, when I teach for 15 minutes, and then students are working independently, let's say online, that might be when I'm taking my physical kids to a mask break, right? Because I can't take my virtual kids to a mask break, but navigating even like the Wi-Fi outside, right? That's not necessarily an option. So we have to just tweak all those kinds of pieces. That's the real detail work that we can do now that we've operationalized a foundation, at least to start with. And now we can move on and say, okay, let's get, and they've been working, the principals have been working really hard to get those details ironed out, but there are a lot of things that you have to consider when you're working with basically 2 groups of kids in 2 different environments. And our teachers need a lot of opportunities to professionally learn around this. It's a big undertaking.
Thank you. I will go, I think I missed Sean before, so I'll go to Sean. Rachel, I see your hand, and then I see Ken's hand raised in the chat. So I'll do Sean, then Rachel, then Ken.
Just doubling down, Wes, on the technology that we're looking at. take me through what a beta test looks like from a student's perspective and from a teacher's perspective. What do they see? What do they feel like? What do they, the async didn't really work for my kid. I can't speak for everybody's kid. The sync is more important to me. But what does that look like in your mind based on what you've currently been testing with folks?
Hi, can you hear me? There we go.
Yep.
So in the test we can, and I'm, may I, Susie, may I share just an image?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
I think that might illustrate things a little bit more. If you just want to give me uno momento to get this up. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, are people able to see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so this here is this is a prototype document. So the system we're looking at has the Logitech 900 series. Camera has the dual microphones. Again, we like it because it cuts out background noises like air conditioning units and other buzzes. So it does that on the actual webcam itself, so the teacher doesn't need to futz around with any software. How it works, and this is me testing it out, is the camera. This is the actual view of that web camera. So that's a photo of me. I'm using the smartboard. Teacher performs the lesson normally, well, with the webcam pointed at them. Now the Google Meet is running for the student. The student will see the teacher here teaching, in person, if there's a demonstration, if there's something actually, going on that the teacher wants them to see, and they'll get a very clean, clear view of whatever's happening on the board. Students can unmute to ask questions. So the students, we're going to have, again, it's up to teachers' professional judgment to figure out a system of how they want to maybe ask a question, or maybe the teacher will just say, okay, wait for me to say, does anyone have any questions? And then you can unmute and say I have a question. And then the teacher can connect with that student. Because we went with a mobile camera option, the teacher can move the camera wherever it needs to be, demos, direct conversations with distance learning students, and anywhere else it needs to be. This is a big request we got from a lot of the special education teachers. And the nice thing is the high quality webcam. If you can see down here, maybe hard with the screen share, I'm all the way in the corner of the classroom. We actually played a lot of loud random music. The distance learners can still hear me perfectly. Right here, Allison Villanueva in this part played a part of a student. And this way the student, if the teacher has certain issues, or we'll say assignments where a student needs to present something to the class, the distance learner can present to the class on the smartboard. And we've also brought into considerations, and this is just if they're doing certain imagery pointing at the board. We're hoping they'll have actual touch technology. The nice thing about buying all this touch technology is it is evergreen. So when this is all over, we have these really nice devices, which will work well hand in hand with our one-to-one rollout. We are also going to be telling teachers to give group work, and it's up to their professional judgment to break down how you want the groups to be. A teacher doesn't know if a first period class has 15 students in it and only a few distance learners, while another class has mostly distance learners. You're going to have to break up the groups differently, but we're going to give them certain tactics and suggestions on how to do that.
Okay, follow-up question on technology. We've got some families less privileged that have problems with high-speed internet, things like that. Have we done anything to solve that problem?
I can answer that. No, we have not. One of the survey questions that we'll be asking as we move forward, Mr. McAvoy, will be just that.
I think Craig's got something.
So Sean, we did fill out with the state a grant application for a maximum of 431 full internet access and devices, including mobile hotspots. And we're being told that although the state will fund the large urban areas first, it would be fantastic even if we get a portion of that, because we can make sure that every single child has a device and internet access, even if it's a hotspot.
And I presume we base that around the Title I numbers then?
It's a combination of Title I. It also includes housing, SNAP, TAMP, Social Security, and any other type of assistance in the town.
Okay. I'm good for now.
Sean, just one piece that I feel like I should add to both your questions around the student view and even Nora's is there is a part of the lesson, just like in the classroom, where it's asynchronous, where kids are doing work, right? So they're not always hearing the teacher. They may be working independently for a half an hour or 25 minutes, or maybe possibly working independently for 15 minutes and then having to partner up with one particular student. I'm on a screen and you're not, and we're working together. So that's also part of the lesson from the student view. The other piece that I felt like is worth noting is when Wes shared his screen, you could see why the boards are incredibly important, because if we did not have those middle school boards, what kids would have been viewing is just a whiteboard. And you could see how in the middle school, you could see, and well, in some of our other spots as well, you could see how challenging that is to be able to access what the teacher is writing on a plain whiteboard. So I don't know the history fully, at least, why we didn't have, or why they took away those boards from the middle school. I think it had something to do with the one-to-one technology. I would have argued that they were still needed even in that circumstance, because that's how the teacher engages with the students. But nonetheless, in this environment, you have to have the board. Otherwise, you're using chart paper or a whiteboard, and kids' experience is not good.
Well, that actually brings up a good point. So from a teacher's perspective, can they see all of the remote students on their panel? Do they know who's remote?
Absolutely.
Can they see that they're engaged, they're watching, they're participating?
And yeah, and one thing we will be doing is we're thinking about coming up with expectations for the students, if cameras would be on for certain parts of the lesson, and as Dr. De Silva just said, you know, we're learning of tips and tricks for, okay, if I'm in a 90-minute period, okay, for this 15 minutes, you guys can get off the meet because you're going to work on your own, come back in 15 minutes, we're going to be on a timer. And so, yeah, we are definitely working on that. The other nice thing about the touch technology at the ViewSonics is we'll be using Smartboard software and Google's Jamboard. So anything that the teachers do in class can now live forever online. So if a student for some reason can't get it, now it's digitally saved.
It sounds like you're putting a lot of thought into it. I know this is all uncharted waters, but I appreciate the beta testing and the work behind the scenes to ensure that we at least think we know what we're getting into.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give Wes a little bit more credit, because the last time we met, I should have said this, on July 22nd, I think there was a thought that maybe we couldn't get those cameras, and they're sitting in a factory in Connecticut. And would have been
I'm impressed.
So.
I'm impressed. Took me 3 months to get mine.
Yeah, so that's the only reason I bring it up. So we're proud that, and they would have been here already, it sounds like. So thanks to Wes, a lot of hard work on his part.
Thank you.
Rachel, before I get to you, it looks like I just want to give, it looks like Karen Dewing's hand might be raised. So I just want to give her a chance to speak if there was something she wanted to talk to from earlier.
Nope, Dr. Silva answered my what I was going to say. So thank you.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I didn't see the hand sooner. Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
Okay.
You know, I just wanted to say there's definitely so many complexities to this. It's so obvious, but everybody really is just pitching in and doing their best work. I mean, to hear, you know, Dr. De Silva and Wes talk about, you know, technology, I mean, you guys definitely have a handle on this. And it's so complex, but yet it's so important, right? To get our students and our staff back into the classroom safely. And to welcome them back. And I just think as a community and as a board, we need to be positive now. We need to be supportive, and we need to move forward, because, you know, some of the children are very excited to go back to school and parents too. So we need to remember that, and that it is a place of joy. And I really think that it's a very responsible decision, Dr. De Silva, that you made with our reopening plan modifications this evening. And let's move forward. Let's do this.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Ken, I think you were next.
Asked and answered, so I'm good.
Okay. I do have some questions, but before I ask, did any other board members have anything that came up? They didn't get a chance. Okay. I had a question regarding Dr. De Silva. You mentioned something about funding from the state kind of being dependent on which model we're in or if there's full reopening. Can you explain that a little bit more to me?
I will do the best that I can. There was actually a press conference at 4 o'clock of which I missed, unfortunately. But what I know so far is that schools, the school districts, and perhaps I'll watch it later tonight, but school districts are expecting some funding. What that funding is and how it's connected, whether it's connected to Title I. You might remember we were told we were going to receive some funding before, and we just barely received $88,000. But that funding was connected to, in other words, the schools that provided a full experience, i.e. all children coming in 5 days, full days, would receive more funding than schools that either were full remote or hybrid. That said, for example, our K-8 model, they don't consider hybrid because it's a transition to full within 4 weeks. It was actually accidental on our part. We planned for 4 weeks and then found out that that's how they described a transition to full as full for K-8. But they did relate whatever funding we would receive, that we would receive less if we went full remote and less, maybe not as less, but if we went hybrid K-12. And so I don't know what happened from the call at 4 o'clock. I don't know how much. I don't know if we would even receive anything here in Ridgefield, but that was a conversation both the commissioner had discussed and the governor.
Thank you. My next question has to do about cohorting, because obviously that's something that's come up quite a bit. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about it, because I understand cohorting itself, in and of itself, is a strategy. It's not a requirement. And I understand a lot of other districts are going to open like us in a hybrid model. Can you help me understand how it might be different between the high school and the middle school in terms of the importance of cohorting and why that might be, why we might be treating them differently?
So right now, we know, and I will say this, our enrollment is increasing. So likely at our next board meeting, we should, or a board meeting from that, talk about enrollment. So people are moving into Ridgefield, specifically at the middle school. I know that they have seen, and actually even at the elementary, but have seen an increase. I don't know how that will play out with respect to how many students temporary remote option learn, but we are seeing an increase in our student population. That said, we know that we have about 90 students that we can cohort and contact trace at the middle school. When we look at the high school, for example, just think about all the variability that comes with high school classes, choice, and the number of students. We couldn't possibly find a cohort within there. There would just be too many. So we, at the high school, right from the beginning, we knew that we didn't even have the ability to say, we have a cohort. We don't have a cohort. There's no way that you can attain that. And so that, coupled with a lot of the other challenges around social distancing, we felt recommended the hybrid because we felt like we couldn't do that well.
And so I know you mentioned that a lot of the operational details will be forthcoming after this plan, the bigger plan has been presented and decided. So middle school parents will get a better understanding of how that might look in terms of the cohorting in middle school.
So middle school parents, elementary school parents, and high school parents will know for sure. I will say that for me right now, the struggle that I've been having is, and that we've all been having, but most certainly around the issues of childcare for our students, let's just say grades K, pre-K, but K 7, right? 8th grade, you're probably 12, 13, maybe 13, depending upon who you are as a child. You may be able to be independent for a longer period of time. So our K 7 students, it is very important to those families that they know which cohort they're a part of, right? Because once they know which cohort they're a part of, they can plan childcare, not only the cohort, but the teacher, right? So if I'm an elementary parent and I am in Ms. Gatos's class and my last name is D and your last name is D, let's just say it's Alpha, right? All those details haven't been ironed out, but let's say we're Alpha and we're D. I know that we're going to be home Thursday, Friday, right? So now if I work and you don't work, we can navigate how our children may distance learn together when mom am home or dad are home or I have a nanny or whatever the situation is. So hopefully no later than August 14th, we can get that information out to families so that they can begin planning around childcare. What days is my kid coming to school? What days is my kid not? Do I have the ability to manage with someone else's? Maybe 3 or 4 kids can come together. Ideally, you know, it's not perfect, but it's the best situation that we can have at this moment. And speaking to our PTAs earlier this week, they felt that that was one of the most impactful shifts that we can make, is just letting parents know as soon as possible. I think we'll start to operationalize that again. There's a lot of details, as Ms. Flogel mentioned, which, you know, so if you ask me to shift from my class to this class, and then all of a sudden that impacts a sibling and how that impacts a sibling, there's just a lot of details, but the sooner we can get that to families, the better with respect to childcare. Hopefully the Boys and Girls Club, the rec center, I imagine, can help out once they know as well. Remember, you're hearing this first, right? Now it goes to the public, and then all the other organizations hopefully can start working around to support, and our faculty too. And once they find out our schedule, then they know their own children's schedule and can start navigating childcare around that sense of, it's a challenge, there's no doubt, especially for our younger children.
Was there any thought kind of along the idea of cohorting, but also because potentially it could maybe help with transportation costs? Was there any discussion about cohorting, not by alphabet, but by bus route or street?
No.
I think it would be very complex, but I thought I'd ask.
Dr. Hanaway may have thought about that, and one of the, but no,
it did come up, but unfortunately, Margaret, was dismissed relatively quickly because of the lack of reliability.
Yeah.
You know, that students can make a decision change at any point, and then your numbers are off. And so the alphabet is really the starting point. It is not a straight alphabet. The alphabet is how they're starting for a starting point, but also because of siblings. And then there are moves that are made for many, many reasons, whether they be further to siblings, you know, an imbalance in the alphabet 50-50. Students, you know, especially at the younger levels, who shouldn't be placed in the same class for good reasons, and vice versa, and things like that. So the alphabet is really a starting point, but we try to think of other variations that would be reliable enough. And really, there was nothing as consistent as that.
And I think that's an important piece for families to remember, because ultimately, even though our K-8 students right now are hybrid for 4 weeks, right? We could be in a position where we're hybrid longer. And if we're hybrid longer, we do not want to have to shift where students are. And so placing students in the right cohort is important. You probably remember when your children, I remember when mine were in elementary school, the complexity of creating those classes, it takes, you know, a month or more for our teachers to do that. So now they're doing that basically again, but in 2 shifts. And so what we really want to do, and managing class size and managing siblings. So we want to be really thoughtful about how that happens. So to Dr. Hanaway's point, it's starting off by alpha because that's the path of least resistance, but then there'll be a lot of shifts. So the mom of a D that's with a Z shouldn't worry too much. There's just a reason why that might have happened.
Thank you.
Or dad of a D or whoever.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions. One is, I think August 3rd, the State Department of Education did one of their addendums. I think they're up to 4 or 5 now. But talking about the indicators, the infection levels, and who would make those decisions. So I know you kind of mentioned that briefly. They talked about a local structure that would include like the school medical advisor, local health director, and the school nurse. to consult in terms of, where we are from a risk level standpoint. So could you speak to that again, how that will work in Ridgefield?
Yeah, I can start. So first, if I can, I'll answer try to answer one of the questions that comes up a lot through the reopening email inboxes. Tell me exactly what's going to cause you to close a class, to close school, and to close the district. And poor Ed Briggs gets hammered by me and Susie and Karen with questions like this. And the consistent response is it may be one of the three, dependent on the context in which it happens. Are we talking about symptoms? Are we talking about a COVID case? What is the contact tracing showing us? What was the person's last exposure in the building? So in any of those scenarios could cause a temporary quarantine of a class of a school, or the entire school shutdown would definitely be based on more than an isolated case. He has made that clear to us. So the pattern and flow of information from an individual case would start with the school nurse and the administration in the building to both Aaron Crook as the nursing coordinator and the health and safety liaison, and Susie, to then Ed Briggs and Dr. Ahern, who's our district medical advisor. And so between Susie, Aaron, Dr. Ahern, and Ed Briggs, there's a decision made there about that immediate case and situation, whether or not it requires something to happen for that class, the school, or maybe even more than an individual school. And then from there, excuse me, the conversation around the data on a weekly basis is shared, and sometimes even more than weekly, from Aaron Crook with Susie, our district medical advisor, and Ed Briggs as the Department of Public Health. And that's where he feels so strongly about the health office paras, not only from the containment room perspective, but for the accuracy of the collection of the data on a daily basis, so that he can have a real-time reporting to those folks, so that decisions can be made between at Ed's level around, is our risk level rising? Because if Aaron doesn't have accurate real-time information from the individual schools, then Ed doesn't have them in real time in order to make decisions that will be safest. We have not received specific information that I'm aware of on how different municipalities, public health departments are going to share that information if there is to be a regionalized decision. And where we are, as Susie talks about a lot, we kind of are at this intersection of two different regions between Western Connecticut and between Fairfield County. So I'm not really sure exactly how those are going to work between the different health departments, but there's an immediate conversation that then goes to the district level, and then Ed is brought in, and that review of data, whether or not there's a risk or whether or not there's a change in risk, is going to have to happen at minimum on a weekly basis.
Thank you. Not easy. Let's see, my question about enrollments, you said we'll get to that. I had a question for Dane. Is Dane still on?
Yes.
Yes. I just had a question. UConn recently canceled its football season. So I just wondered, do we think that may have an impact on where the CIAC goes? My understanding is the plan that they came out with is really just a draft plan that they were seeking input on, but that, like everything, it's flexible and can move. And I just wondered if you have a sense of where that might go, and if the UConn decision might play into that a little bit.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that front. I would say, first and foremost, the CIAC officials have always followed up each of their plans with, this is a fluid situation. We're going to continue to evaluate it based on the most up-to-date information that we have. So I'm sure that as we move forward, we will stick to that if things change considerably in the coming weeks, then there would be a change to the plan. As far as the differences between the collegiate level and the high school level, there are a lot of differences. Most notably is the fact that on a college campus, you are bringing people together from all over the country or potentially all over the world into that college setting. And then their schedules call for them to travel all over, the United States potentially to play. And so that risk of exposure or that risk of transmission by that additional travel is one of the reasons why some of those college decisions are being made, whether it's done at an individual institution level, or whether, you know, I'm sure you've seen some of the conferences have decided to cancel their sports. Some of the conferences have decided to go to a model where they're only playing within their own conference. So there's a lot of thinking around that. I will say one of the calls that I was on earlier this month was with the director of the NFHS, which is the National Federation of High Schools. And she was very clear in that the stance of the NFHS is to support those states who feel like they can move in a direction to allow their kids to play sports. And of all the states in the United States that are in a position right now, we are probably in the best spot to try. So, you know, while we continue to look at the data, you know, the impact that involvement in athletics and other extracurriculars has on our student athletes is just as important to their mental health and their well-being as getting back into their classes. And so, you know, based off of the data that we have right now and the current information in Connecticut, we're going to give it a shot. I do think there is a big difference, though, based on the collegiate level versus the high school level. And that's one of the reasons why within that plan, they're talking about scheduling on a more regionalized basis, as opposed to, you know, a situation where, for instance, I mentioned our field hockey team, we were supposed to play Conard, who's a school up in West Hartford. And so that won't be happening. So we'll be staying a little bit closer to home, hopefully with a schedule that still allows us to play and have that experience as part of our plan for the fall.
Great, thank you. And as I looked through the CIAC plan a little bit, it looked like the requirements for transportation are actually different than the transportation requirements for going to school. So I know you said you'll be looking into transportation and some options and stuff. So look forward to hearing how that gets addressed.
Yep.
And then the last thing for Dane, at least, Susie, you had mentioned, you know, the loss of some revenue from parking potentially, and that impacting our budget. So Dane, I don't know if there's been any thought yet to pay to play, at least for the fall sports. Are you looking to reduce that fee, or has that been a discussion yet?
So we have talked about that briefly. You know, one of the things from an operational standpoint is, as I know you've had children come through the athletics department. And so over the last couple of years, we've moved to that online registration piece. So at that point, when students register for their sport, the fee is assessed in Power School. Now, whether it's paid right away or not is up to the family. You know, when we open that window next week, it's going to be the same process. That fee will be assessed, but then certainly as we go through, we will look at, once we have a final plan and we know what the schedule looks like, if we feel like there needs to be an adjustment, not unlike the ongoing conversation around parking and some of those things. So we will keep that in mind. Certainly when there was a question earlier about savings and you know, expenses that we will not be incurring, and those would be there for sure in the athletics world too. I mean, if we talk about a season of 12 games as opposed to 16, you're talking either probably a couple fewer trips, a couple fewer games where we're responsible for the payment of officials. So as we, you know, as we finalize that plan of what the schedule looks like, we'll be able to take a closer look at the financial side and see what we need to do to make sure that we are making ends meet.
Thank you. I just have two more things. This is more on the expense cost side of things. I think, you know, so thank you so much for sharing with us the costs that we've already incurred and those that are anticipated. And again, I know that that's fluid. I know back before we had to submit the 3 models, there was I think you anticipated or submitted to the state that we might be spending about 1.6 million. And I think at that time, all districts had to submit their fees. And it's, I know the Connecticut Mirror actually had an article that showed all the different anticipated additional expenditures from all the different districts. And we were on the low side. We were really on the low side. Some, I think, were up to, you know, in the multiple millions. So just, again, if we can just keep our eyes on that, but it does sound like you're doing a really good job trying to really look at things and not just spend with a blank checkbook, but really trying to make sure that we're doing things that make sense for the health and safety of our students, and looking for offsets where you can.
So Ms. Mattis, just Dawn has, I know the question came up at the Board of Finance meeting about who's tracking and how are we ensuring that all COVID expenses are being tracked a particular way. Dawn, obviously she didn't include it into the PowerPoint presentation, but she's been tracking that pretty well and actually has every department. They send all COVID related expenses to Dawn so that she can track them by department and obviously have a good understanding of where we are in terms of our expenditures. We also did have the ability to modify what we had originally submitted to the state on July 17th. I actually modified that yesterday, along with the change in our reopening plan. And so the costs are higher now than they were at that time, because we have a better sense of where we are than on July 17th, obviously.
Yeah, and again, I know, there's a lot of fluidity here and things constantly changing. My last question actually has to do with budget as well. So I was on a CABE board chair webinar today, and there was mention of the fact that some state submissions for FEMA reimbursement that typically they would have very easily counted on as being something that would have been reimbursed, I think typically at that 75% rate, have been denied. And I haven't been able to fact check or find out exact details because, like I said, it was in a call late this afternoon. I don't know if anyone has heard that yet. Even Sean, if you've heard that from your emergency management.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We have a regional call twice a week, Region 5, all the towns north of us and to the east. Yeah, they've been denying some things like plexiglass, things that even some staffing numbers. If it was somebody that's doing overtime that would not necessarily been laid off, whatever, they're playing games with the numbers even there. So yeah, we have to be kind of careful. But remember, the schools don't submit for reimbursement from FEMA, the town does. So we have to stay close to Kevin Redmond and their folks to make sure we have our ducks in a row.
Thank you. Thanks for that update. Okay, that was it for my questions. Does any other board member before we switch to, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I've got just one quick one. We talked about, Wes, the technology from the student perspective. What's the, I interface with teachers from a few different districts in the area, and I'm hearing mixed reviews on their willingness to participate in this new reality. What are we hearing from our staff? How do they like what they're seeing? How is the adoption rate? Can they handle it?
I think they can handle it because they handled the Herculean task of what happened this past spring. And we got to see lots of highly dynamic teaching going on in, I would say, one of the worst case scenarios, right? It was just not ideal on so many levels, and they really rose to the occasion. And I kind of came up with this method with a bunch of other stakeholders by getting their feedback. A great example is a lot of other districts are installing the screwed in webcams. We wanted the mobile webcams. Teachers want to be mobiles. They're highly dynamic. They want to put cameras on things. And the other thing is, if we have to go full distance learning, they could take the cameras home. And now the teacher has this high quality camera in their home that they can use if they need to point at a whiteboard or something that they're doing in their kitchen. The teachers, they want to teach and they want the most dynamic ability. So I'm just there to try to support them and get them as many platforms and tools as possible.
Sean, so I'll probably speak to another piece that Wes may or may not know about. I think across our state, teachers and their leadership have responded differently. I also think that there's a lot that our teachers don't know yet. They're not here. They don't, they're hearing, some of them may be hearing about this for the first time. And so their comfort level may shift, right? So when they initially see this camera, and just like it did with the distance learning experience, there were teachers that were very uncomfortable having themselves viewed in someone's home and or having teaching in this kind of environment. They grew from A to Z in many ways. Overall, we've been very communicative with our union and being sure that they understand the why behind our decision about using live streaming. And I think anyone that understands or has read what we've been asked to do in terms of a temporary remote learning option or a hybrid, there is not an alternative. The only alternative is to send children home on a Khan Academy or Edu something and let them teach themselves. And I hope that when our teachers arrive here to school on the 19th of August, that they will agree that this is the best thing for children. And there wasn't really an alternative that met children's needs, given the scenarios that we had to work with.
Thank you. Susie, can I just add one thing that I don't want to forget to mention is that, parents are hearing a lot of information right now, whether it be about the schedules or their cohorts or wherever the case may be. We've mentioned, in passing, like you'll hear from your schools. And I just want to make sure that parents know that they don't have to contact their principals tonight, tomorrow morning, Monday morning, and say, what cohort is my child in? They are going to receive information about what cohort their child's in. And again, and I'm just using the cohort as an example, whether it be a myriad of these other details, all the operational pieces, the principals are putting together a cohesive communication to go out to families so that they receive all of that at once. And again, some of what we're talking about, may be a variation of that you'll receive from your principal. Like, for example, I didn't fall in my A through K cohort. I'm in the other cohort. Well, that's because at times there may be a difference. It may not be exact. So there may be specific details that are slightly different. And that's because of the way the building functions. And all that information is going to go proactively from the schools to parents. So they don't need to say, wait, was there something that I missed?
The other piece to that, and Wes mentioned his collaboration with Dr. Hanaway around the website, is that soon enough that website will be ready. The icons will match the reopening plan that has been revised and will be shared with families tomorrow. And so because the reopening plan is 50 pages long and there's a lot of words there. I don't want a lot of words. I just want to find my kid's schedule or just want to understand about transportation. So they'll have that icon. They can just click there. It was actually modeled after a colleague who started there actually for parents, incredibly user-friendly. And then you can read the 50-page document when you have time, but at least you can just go right to the resource that you need or the question that you have. We also need to add to our frequently asked questions, and we'll continue to do so as parents have used the reopening email. And we'll continue to have that open. At some point, we'll close it. But for now, we'll continue to take it and we'll take those questions and eventually get a more comprehensive FAQ up for families.
And eventually those questions should go to your building anyway. Yes. That's definitely going to be the case.
That's a great segue into my last question, which was going to be, since you have been monitoring and answering all the emails that go to the reopening email address. We've asked some questions tonight, but are there any questions that you feel that you've either gotten quite a few of or that you'd want to make sure that you can answer or at least bring forward in this public setting?
I mean, I think we tried, and I know Susie, oftentimes both email addresses are on single emails, but I think we tried to address as many of them as we could, either through the document or through presentations. But a consistent question we get is, I think somewhat to Kathleen's earlier question, like, why don't you just, and that could be a variety of things. And I think that what we want to make clear is that while the governor has given us more flexibility, we don't have full leeway to plan, in a way that colleges and universities do, say, for example, because we have to be able to not only meet state law, but ensure that students meet requirements for graduation that are set forth through state law. So there are limitations. And I think that is probably one of the biggest consistent themes. And it's such a big, deep conversation that's hard to have over email. But we often get examples from either private institutions or from higher ed saying, look what this smart place is doing. And it's totally a smart place. And it sounds like it's a good plan for them, but we don't always have the same rules to follow. And so what we're trying to do is what's best for us, what's smartest for us. It's not without criticism, that's for sure, but we always can't compare to institutions in other situations.
The questions that I think that are still lingering out there, I've received, and actually so has Dr. Hanaway and Ms. Dewing, a lot of questions related to curriculum. So what is the curriculum going to look like? Are we going to have readers, writers workshop? What is the block schedule look like? How is my child going to feel? And to be fair, and Craig was a part of this conversation earlier in the day, is that, or even assessments, right? Like, when are you going to assess my child? And I will say this from a human perspective, but as an educator, second. Kids are not going to come to school and be tested right away. That's just not going to happen. Kids need to come, they need to acclimate into their environment, they need to become comfortable, they need to get their routine in step, They don't need to worry about, we don't need to pull out the running record day one. I may actually, listen to a child read a day or two and see what I hear, and then eventually maybe a formal running record. But that's not what children are going to experience those first couple of weeks of school. There's no place for that. Not right now. They need to know that we're connecting, we're here. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to look like when you're home. This is what it's going to look like if we're home 5 days. Let's develop our relationships with our classmates, because we don't know what 3 weeks are going to look like. And if this is my only shot at developing my community, we need to do that. We need to really think about the social emotional needs of our kids and obviously of our staff. That's an important first 4 weeks right now. They say the first 6 weeks, let's get through those 4 weeks of school. In terms of curriculum, we're navigating that. And what does that look like? I would say that for our elementary children, of course, we're going to be teaching content, but those first 2 weeks, we have to be sure that kids are getting comfortable with what that experience is going to look like, because for some of our children, it will be the first time in school. Or for some of our children, they came to first grade for 6 months and they didn't have the same experience as another child who may have had their parent home with them. So there's a lot of mini units that are going to be around the experience, the distance learning experience. There'll be a lot of mini units around social emotional learning and connectedness and feeling that we're part of a community, whether it's half of us or the whole of us, right? Because there's going to be a whole other half that you're not going to meet for a while. And what that's going to look or feel like for our K-8 students. So I want to be sure that families hear that. It's not that that academics are very important to me, but no one can access academics if their social emotional needs are not met. And so that's going to be first, and the academics will be second. So that is a question that people are asking for sure.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next item, which is the action on the calendar, is there any other questions from board members or any other comments that the administration would like to make? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much for all of the hard work that continues to go into this. I hope that the whiplash decreases over the next few weeks, but thank you. I know it's a really Herculean effort, and it's constantly evolving and changing, and fluidity is the word of the summer. So thank you. All right, so we will move on to the next item, which is the 2020-21 school calendar. This is an action item. We had reviewed this at the discussed this at the July 22nd meeting, and Dr. De Silva spoke a little bit about it earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and we'll jump right into the action, and then if we have some more discussion, we can do that. So do I have a motion to approve the adjustments to the 2020-21 school calendar? Someone wants to raise their hand? Anyone?
I so move.
Okay, Ken, do I have a second? Okay, Liz, thank you. Any discussion? I think Dr. De Silva has done a good job of explaining. I'm sorry, Liz, was that you? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I think Dr. De Silva has done a good job of explaining in both meetings why the reason for this change. So, all right. So we'll go straight to a vote. I'm going to do a roll call only because there's some people on cell phones, so it's hard to see hands. So if you agree, just say yes. If you disagree, say no. Ken?
Agree. Sorry.
That's okay. Kathleen?
Yes.
Nora?
Agree.
Sean?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And I don't believe Jonathan or Karina is on. So, so that is 7-0, unanimous. The calendar has been changed. Thank you. And now the next thing is the motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Kathleen, do I have a second?
Second.
Ken? All those in favor? This one you can raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Again, thanks for all the work. Thank you guys so much for making yourselves available tonight under these trying circumstances, to all the board members and administration.
Everybody.
Everyone
Thanks,
be
everybody.
safe, be well.
Yeah.